Hello, and welcome back to a fun time reading a book with me, Valerie Monroe, and me, Bookwormy. We are so glad you're here to hear a story with us. That's right, we have been reading down the Swale. And if you remember from yesterday, things were getting hugely exciting and very suspenseful too. That's right, suspenseful and exciting. If you remember yesterday, Aunt Gladys had been sitting in front of a door, the tiny door that leads to the room where Maggie's tank is. And Simp had been trying to get her to move, and he was counting to three. Three, he said sharply, and still Aunt Gladys did not move. Simp used neither the gun nor the harpoon. Instead, he reached down, picked up Aunt Gladys in his fist, and flung her aside. She flew through the air, hit the wall, and slumped to the floor motionless. Aha, Simp said then, grinning broadly. Aunt Gladys had been sitting on top of a tiny key. He scooped it up and inserted it into the lock. It made a tiny popping sound as it snapped open. He yanked the lock off. The door swung open, and the cool, watery scent of the water rolled over him. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, he said joyously as he began to descend the stairs. Rumble, rumble. All my life, he muttered to himself, I've waited for this moment, dreamed of it. There were just a few steps left. Come to Papa, you little monster. Come make Papa a rich, rich man. He got to the cement wall at the bottom and raced around it triumphantly, brandishing the harpoon high above his head. And then he stopped. The dark green murky water of the tank was still and empty. The rumbling sound had ceased, and the silence was definitely eerie. Simp walked up to the tank and stood there scratching his head. That's strange, I thought, he mumbled. Where is she? He wheeled around, and his beady eyes darted from side to side. I heard a voice in here, too, so I know someone's in here, he hollered. Where are you? He waited, but there was still no movement. Still no sounds. Come out, wherever you are, he sang out in a high-pitched voice. Nothing. He pressed his forehead against the tank's cool glass. I'm so close now, he thought. I'm sure of it. Simp strained his eyes, trying to gain a glimpse of something, anything, inside the murkiness. He wiped his glasses on his shirt and rubbed the lenses until they were clean. Just as he was about to turn away, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. A small, almost imperceptible stream of bubbles rising to the surface. He gripped the harpoon tightly. I've got you now, you little monster! His voice rose excitedly. Show yourself! I have no fear of you. I demand it. Show yourself. Nothing. More silence. Darn it, he cried, banging on the front of the tank. And just then, one of the containers that was stacked against the wall toppled over and rolled to a stop at his feet. What in the world? Who's there? His eyes searched all around as his heart pounded like a bass drum, but he saw no one. He stared at the container for a moment, and then a lovely smile spread across his face. That's it, he said, nodding. A little snack might do the trick. Yep, it's feeding time at the zoo. He bent down to the container and started to lift its lid, when suddenly it popped off and flew into the air. Now, Maggie, now, Brogden commanded, leaping from the container where he had been hiding. Now, he repeated at the top of his lungs. Simp found himself unable to move. His overloaded mind couldn't decide what was more shocking, the foot-high boy with the long neck, or the fearsome beast with the long neck, who was rapidly slithering over the top of the tank as its snake-like head reached toward him? Roar! Simp looked in horror into Maggie's wide-open mouth. Rows upon rows of glinting, spiky teeth were moving quickly in his direction. Ah! Simp shrieked. Ah! Roar! Maggie's tail thrashed from side to side, drenching both Brogden and Simp. She snapped her mouth open and shut as she moved closer and closer to Simp. He stumbled backwards, tripped over the pail, scrambled back onto his feet, and stood shaking with his back against the wall. And then he remembered his harpoon. Back off, he yelled at Maggie, holding it with the point out. Back off, I tell you. All those years ago, your mother, Morag, almost killed one of my uncles, and no one believed him. People said he was crazy, a fool. Simp paused to catch his breath. Well, the time has come for revenge. I will reveal you to the world, and everyone will know the truth. People will see you for the monster you are, and I will be rich. He heaved the harpoon through the air toward the tank. It wasn't until a moment later that Simp realized his mistake. In his rage, he had forgotten to hold on to the rope that was tied to the harpoon. He watched with a mixture of terror and disbelief as the rope uncoiled and danced like a wild snake in the air. He tried to grab the end of it, but it was too late. The harpoon hit the water first, and the attached rope floated down into the tank after it. Uh-oh, he muttered as Maggie, who had avoided being hit by the harpoon with a quick twisting move, glared at him and be prepared to strike. Now without a weapon, Simp watched as her great neck once again rose above the top of the tank, her jaws wide and moving swiftly toward him. Things are not going too well for Simp, right? Roar! Good girl, Maggie, cried Brogden from where he had hidden behind all the other containers. Simp ducked to the right as the giant creature's mouth snapped shut. He could feel her hot breath and then a flashing pain as several of his hairs were plucked out. Letting out a yowl, he realized he had no choice but to attempt an escape, because the next time the monster lunged at him, it would be more than just a few hairs. It would be his head. But before he went, he had an idea. He eyed Maggie warily, trying to figure out how best to make a run for it. And then he caught sight of a black plastic bag in the corner of the room. He snatched it up and grinned. Okay, so maybe I can't get you this time, you beast. But there's still another way to get the money. I'm sure a zoo or a lab will pay for your little friend. You know who he's talking about, right? Our guy, Brogden. He lunged in the direction of the containers, brusquely knocking them aside and away from Brogden. Several of them popped open, and the pellets rolled out across the floor. Brogden tried to run, but Simp was too fast. He grabbed Brogden by the waist and dropped him into the bag. Brogden screamed and twisted frantically in a futile attempt to free himself. Roar! Maggie continued, snapping her jaws, but Simp dodged and swerved, evading her ferocious teeth. Let me out! Let me out! Sobbed Brogden from inside the bag. Let me out, Simp mimicked as he managed to scoot around the cement wall and out of Maggie's reach. He slung the bag over his shoulder. Oh, I'll let you out, Simp snickered. I promise. And when I do, I will be a much richer man. He pushed the small door open, strode past the still unconscious Aunt Gladys and Mackie, raced up the stairs two at a time, and rushed to the front door. And then he stopped again. Uh-oh, he said flatly. The sailboat woman and the Seagull Man were standing there with a policeman. In a flash, the Seagull Man yanked the black bag away from him. Oh, thank goodness. And the policeman pulled his hands behind his back. "You're under arrest," the policeman said, just before the handcuffs clicked into place. Yay! Brogdon was saved! And Maggie too! But there's still one more chapter. Chapter 16. We'll read it tomorrow. So please join us again. I loved that chapter. It was so exciting. And I like how you did all of the roaring. Thank you. I appreciate your compliment. So please come back tomorrow and we'll read the end of the book. I can't believe we're almost to the end of the book. Me neither. All right. See you tomorrow.